Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
There we go.
My name's Dee, and I'm an alcoholic. And I've never used the name Dolores in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Terry Sue's known me for over 20 years. He says, "Who is this person?" Anyhow, I think they got that off my check or something when I registered. Anyhow, no, I used the same name that I said the first day I got carried into the rooms, and all I could get out was, "My name's Dee, and I'm an alcoholic." And those 7 words helped save my life. First of all, before I start, I'd like to thank the committee for inviting me to do this, and I especially would like to thank Alan Kay, because I know that he's the person that recommended me for this particular workshop. And I also want to say how happy I am to be doing a workshop that has a topic tied to newcomers, because I am one of those people who has had the good fortune of being around this program and having continuous sobriety for a few 24 hours. But I will tell you that what keeps me sober today is what got me sober several years ago. The things that I do, I try to remember. When I start feeling disconnected at all, I try to remember the basics, and the basics have held me in good stead for a lot of years. I was also taught that anytime I go to a table, a panel, or a podium, I make sure I have one of these close by, the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is my teddy bear, you know. This is my blanket, my security blanket. And one of the things that I think of every time I think of this is a woman who was in one of my first meetings in Sacramento, and she held one of these books up, and she said, "This is an ass-saving kit. But first you've got to find your bottom," you know? And I can tell you that by the time she was saying that to me, I had found mine. I wasn't sure exactly where it was or which end was up, but I had found it. I very briefly want to share a little bit about what it was like and what happened to me, and what helped me as far as my newcomer year, if you will, my first year, and what continues to help me in this program. They tell me that all I have to share is my own experience, strength, and hope. And so for my 15 minutes or so, that's what I plan to share. I will tell you that my first drink was when I was 17 years of age, and I realized that in today's society I was a late bloomer. I got a late start. But I was on a senior trip to Washington. I lived in North Carolina. I was on a senior trip to Washington, and we bought some wine, and we were in a hotel room. And the main thing that I remember about that, because I think it really kind of laid the trail for my drinking and for what alcohol was to do for me, I was an athlete, and I had caught a softball in the teeth, and I had a partial plate. And in those days, they didn't cap your teeth. They put a partial in that you could flip out with your tongue, or you took out when you brushed your teeth and stuff, you know. And I'm 17 years old, right? And I'm very vain about that, so I don't let anybody see me anytime, any place, brushing my teeth or anything, you know. And what alcohol did for me from the beginning was that when that night was over, they had pictures of me in my underwear, jumping up and down in the middle of the bed with my teeth out. I was a vision of loveliness from the first drink, okay? And alcohol was to do that for me for a lot of years. Now, after I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I thought back on that experience, and I heard something that made me realize that, you know, if I had known that then, well, I probably wouldn't have done a thing differently. But one of the things that I did not have a problem with when I got carried into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous 24 years later is that I never, ever have had a problem debating whether or not I'm an alcoholic. And one of the things that helped satisfy that for me is that I heard in these rooms that not all alcoholics have blackouts, but that only alcoholics have blackouts. And I had a blackout the first night I drank. Now, I hear the term blackout, and a lot of people hear that, and they think it's pass out. Normies think it's pass out. No, it's an alcoholic amnesia, excuse me, senior moment. Anyhow, it's an alcoholic amnesia, and it's like somebody just skips the tape a little bit, and so it doesn't record. And what I love about that, you know, one of the things, see, I have a partner that's over 25 years in Al-Anon, and one of the things I know about normies that they get so upset with us about is when we can't remember what we did the night before. And they don't realize that it didn't tape. There's nothing there. It doesn't matter how hard I try to remember it. If I've had a blackout, I'm not going to remember it because it didn't record, you know. And that happened to me from the first drink. Now, as I said, I went through 24 years of drinking. And interestingly enough, again, when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I realized that I was what they called a functioning alcoholic. What that meant was that I drank a lot, but I never lost my job. Okay? I still worked. And doesn't mean I didn't leave before I lost them sometimes, before I knew somebody was going to, you know, be asking me to. But I was still working when I got carried into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I used work and my education and schooling, a lot of that stuff, all the degrees, I used that to prove that I wasn't an alcoholic for a lot of years, you know. On the other hand, by the time I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, again, I found out, after a lot of work in here, that I was what they call a daily drinker and a periodic drunk. I hear about daily drinkers and periodic drinkers and stuff. Well, I realized that my pattern was I drank every day. After work, at home, take the edge off. That was my favorite thing. On the weekends, go to the bar, take the edge off. I must have been the smoothest chick around, I'll tell you. I took a lot of edges off over the years. Anyhow, the last drink, and I think that these are the two that I want to keep fresh, if you will. The last one, by the grace of God, was on March 10th of 1981. And that night, I was at basically the peak of my career. I was working at the Department of Education in Sacramento. I was driving a Porsche. I was living at the right address out in Selby Ranch. And I was going to this reception for legislators and all these people, you know, and fundraiser thing, about 300 people. And they didn't have a lot of booze to drink there, but they had bulk wine. Well, you know, by that time I wasn't real picky, and so I stuck around for about 4 hours drinking bulk wine. And I took some people to dinner that night. And the reason I know I took some people to dinner that night is because a month later when my American Express bill came in, I saw that I had taken people to dinner that night. I didn't remember it. That was kind of the way I had done a lot of my bookkeeping the last year or so of my drinking. And I took some people to dinner, and then I took this friend to drop her off at her hotel. And next to the hotel was this neon light flashing, and it was a place that we used to go to, a bar called the Party Room in Sacramento. And I vaguely remembered going in and ordering a scotch, ordering a Chivas. And I guess my higher power knew that I was not going to be satisfied going out on bulk wine. So that was the last thing that I remembered that night. The next thing I knew, I was coming to in my bed, 17 miles away. One more time, the car had been driven home, didn't have any blood on the bumper. One more time, I was coming to in the middle of some of the residuals from the night before. My phone was ringing, and the person that was on the other end of that phone was a person that I was seeing at the time from Santa Rosa, California. And I had called her 3 times during the night, terrified, and had absolutely no recollection. Now, the reason that I had apparently called her was because the Friday night before, we had gone to a fundraiser in Sonoma County put on by a group called the Brown Bag Readers Theater, and it was a fundraiser. And I was going because the Women's Support Network was doing this fundraiser, so I was supporting the support network. And for the first time in my life, I heard people talking about alcohol that were professional women, and they were telling their stories, and they were people I could identify with. Now, up to that point, to me, an alcoholic was one of those guys in a trench coat with a wine bottle in his pocket that I stepped around to go to my car when I came out across the parking lot in Sacramento. And I was a victim of my own stereotype, you know? I didn't know this was a progressive disease. I didn't know that there were progressive symptoms, and I didn't know that I had progressed to a point where I could be diagnosed as advanced alcoholism. I had no idea. But those women planted a seed with me. Now, what happened after that was that after listening to them, they made me really thirsty listening to all that talk about alcohol. So I went over to the local restaurant and had a few martinis, and, you know, but they had planted the seed. And so that next Tuesday night, when I had gone out and gotten drunk again and came to on Wednesday morning, apparently sometime during that night, I knew to call the person that had taken me to that. The person on the other end of that phone, when I said, "What are you talking about?" got really angry with me and started to hang up. And all of a sudden I had that moment of clarity, and I said, "Molly, wait, I don't know if I'm an alcoholic, but I know I've got a problem." And she changed gears completely. And she said, "What did you say?" Now see, I didn't know she'd been going to Al-Anon for 3 months because she had this friend that was killing herself, right? I said, "I don't know if I'm an alcoholic, but I need help. I've got a problem." And she immediately, her tone changed, and she said, "Dee, honey, get yourself in the car and get over here, and we'll get you some help." I made a screaming drive from Sacramento to Sonoma County, screaming because I was trying to stay in touch with my own voice, because I kept feeling myself going away. And by the time I got to Sonoma County, I felt like I had waited too late. I knew I was an alcoholic, but I felt like I'd waited too late. And I went into her house, and all of a sudden I couldn't catch my breath, and I couldn't feel my heart beating. I was just, so I ran out the back door. I got a little dramatic, don't you know? And and all of a sudden I felt myself leaving. I literally had an out-of-body experience. I felt myself leaving, and from the tips of my toes, I hadn't been to church in years, but from the tips of my toes, I just screamed, "Please, God, help me." And all of a sudden, I got slammed back into my body. And my friend was handing me a telephone out the back door, and it was one of the women who had been in the presentation the previous Friday night. And I grabbed that phone and I said, "You don't understand, I'm dying, you know." And she said something that I hope I never forget. She said, "I don't think so, Dee." She said, "I think your higher power just got your attention." Well, I immediately dropped the phone because I was about to throw up again, you know, and I ran into the bedroom. And a few minutes later, she and another young woman came walking in, and they kept talking about taking me to a meeting. Now, I had the T-shirt on with the remnants from the night before on it, you know, and they literally carried me into my first meeting. I like to joke that I came in with a friend in each armpit, you know. But they carried me in and set me down up front. And the gentleman that was leading that meeting said, "Is there anyone here in their first 3 meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous?" And I don't know why my hand went up, but it did. And out of my mouth came, "My name's Dee, and I'm an alcoholic." I had an immediate sense of relief. I had an immediate sense of someone having pulled the plug, and that explains it, kind of thing, you know. Now, 2 minutes later, I had another nausea wave and had to run down the hall and go throw up some more, you know. I was still that vision of loveliness that had started this path 24 years earlier. But I was on my way here. 5 days later, I went back to Sacramento, and they gave me numbers, and I started going to meetings on a regular basis. And the kinds of things that saved my life, that put me back together again, I will tell you, I had done a lot of mental and physical damage to myself. I was four months sober when I flipped out in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous in Sacramento, and they strapped me down and carried me off to the psych ward. And I went to La La Land for 6 days and 6 nights. I came out 7 days later, literally, doing a distorted version of the Serenity Prayer over and over and over. I heard this voice. I'm coming through this blue light kind of tunnel thing, and I hear this voice, and then I make contact and realize it's my voice, and I'm doing this distorted version of the Serenity Prayer. And a person sitting next to my bed that's going to be my therapist for the next 2 years, that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous had sent me, someone who worked with alcoholics. I had done a lot of damage to myself, but when I got out of that and when I started coming out of that, people like you in rooms like this put me back together again. I had gone to the top of my career, and then I had gone to a psych ward where I literally had to be taught how to feed myself again, how to put a sentence together, how to talk. Today, 24 years later, I make my living doing educational professional presentations around the country, flying all over the place. By the grace of God, I didn't lose my career, but I'm never so grateful as I am for the opportunity to sit in a room like this and share with a group like this, because you are the reason I didn't leave in that backyard that day. And more importantly, you are the reason why I am still here. I'm very quickly going to tell you that meetings are the answer. And I say that with sitting here happily. I celebrated 24 years March 11th, but it's one day at a time and one meeting at a time. I have kept in my schedule 3 to 5 meetings a week. That's been my standard since I was about 10 years sober. The tools that I've used, obviously the steps are primarily important. I have people that were put in my life early on. I got sober in hardcore AA in Sacramento, and Nina, who taught me what this is called, I used to sit in the meetings and they'd say, it's the first drink to get you drunk, it's the first drink to get you drunk, and I thought, that is bullshit. I could drink 14 or 15 scotches before I got drunk, you know? And one day I made the mistake of saying that out loud. At which point Nina looked up at me and she said, honey, if you step in front of a train, it's not the caboose that kills you. And me and all my intellectual intelligence, I thought, oh, okay, I get it. It's the first one that gets us drunk, okay? There was also a woman named Angel in Sacramento, and I because of the topic of this workshop, I brought this. I've carried this in my big book ever since she dated it, July 31st, 1981. And this is a list that Angel gave me in July after I got out of the hospital. And it's called a survival kit, the disciplined actions of sobriety. And it's a whole list of tips to newcomers. And the very first one is study the first 164 pages of the big book at least once a month. Attend different meetings, which include a big book study, a step study, etc. Plan, avoid stress. She even talks about stuff like straightening up my own environment. You know, she says clean house inside and out. So there's real basic kinds of things. The last thing on here is pray, pray, pray. If you don't know how to pray, make up a prayer, ask somebody for a prayer, read a prayer, but that's simple stuff. Live in the world today. Don't live by other people's limitations, nor your own. Those kinds of things. So that kind of information, I've carried that with me. My first sponsor's name was Tony. Angel was at the podium one day, and one of the things she's got on here is, I will not continue to sponsor anyone who decides to shack up. Such arrangements are usually entered into to avoid changing oneself and are in an effort to get someone else to fix us. Blah, 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 okay? I'm sitting there, and Tony is sitting across the table from me, and she says, I give all my babies vibrators. At which point I said, will you be my sponsor? So one of the things, thank God, that got me sober and has kept me sober is a sense of humor as well. That rule that says don't take yourself too damn seriously, I have to remember that because I have a tendency to get really intense, don't you know, sometimes. But I do know that this is a serious disease, and I take my sobriety seriously. I don't take it lightly. We used to joke about wearing your sobriety like a loose garment, you know, and some of us said we wear it like a wetsuit. But anyhow, so I just, there are so many basics, as I said, that what got me sober keeps me sober. I write on a regular basis. I share with other alcoholics. Service has been a big part of my sobriety. I remember that first sponsor and following her yellow car all over Sacramento, going to meetings that I didn't want to go to, doing things that I didn't want to do, washing ashtrays. I think of Brenda's pitch last night about the ashtray. I got to wash ashtrays. I didn't smoke. I hated the damn job, you know, but I washed those ashtrays, and I still believe that that helped keep me sober. I know it did, because it got me out of myself. I also want to say, before I close, that gay AA and gay AA conventions have been a big part of my sobriety. There are people in this room that I see and I have seen all over this state and all over, period, and sometimes only see them when we hit the conventions. Terry Sue and I have a standing thing. We see each other, let the convention begin, you know, because we've gotten really used to looking for each other and to seeing each other. So not only was it important to me to be able to be part of the mainstream in the middle of the boat of Alcoholics Anonymous, but it was also important for me to do the work on being a clean and sober lesbian and getting comfortable in my own skin with who I am and being that person 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, wherever I am. And today I am pleased to say that I do that professionally and personally. And I feel that's a gift of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I want to leave Jim some time to share with you. Thank you for giving me the chance to share.
My name's Jim, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Jim.
And when I told Dee that I said, well, I guess you go first because I have the more sobriety. It was funny because I was thinking I realized I watched way too much Law and Order because I was thinking, oh, she's the defense, I'm the prosecution, and no, it doesn't work that way. I was just like very confused in my head. I watched so much Law and Order, I sometimes get confused what is real life. And with TiVo, I mean, it's just wonders of AA. You can go to meetings and you can watch what you want on television. This is incredible. You know, one of the things, I go to meetings sometimes and I hear people say, well, and a lot of people have heard me say this, I've never been to a bad meeting in AA. Well, get in my SUV, honey, I'll take you to a few. I mean, I have been to some meetings, honey, that I can't even believe. You know the kind of meeting where you need a meeting after the meeting? The kind of meeting that you go to and you wonder what went on there. What was going on at the meeting? Oh, is it about me? Oh, no, you're not talking about me. Okay. If it's about me, then it couldn't have been important. Anyway, I was sitting here thinking about what it was like almost 26 years ago. It'll be 25 years, 10 months, and 10 and a half months. And what has kept me sober all this time? Well, part of the reason, one of the things that has kept me sober is somebody came up to me a couple of years ago and said to me, I really dislike you. And I said to them, I'm going to stay sober just to piss you off. And, one of the things I remember, I got sober out of a resentment because, you see, I came in 75, I got sober in 79. And there was this guy, some of you may have heard of him, named Don N. And Don has 6 weeks less than me, okay? And so Don got sober right away, and she was just too happy, okay? And she would come into meetings, and she was just so damn grateful I wanted to bitch slap her into Tuesday, okay? And she was so grateful. And I was not grateful. I just had an attitude. It wasn't of gratitude. I just had an attitude. And I would go to meetings, and I would just be pissed off all the time. And my sponsor, Paul Farmer, came up to me and he said, now listen, honey. He said, I want you to think of somebody that you know that has less time than you, that you don't like. Well, that didn't take much time because I didn't like anybody. And now he would say to me, now think of this. If you drink, they'll have more time than you. Well, this in itself would piss me off, okay? And this in itself would keep me sober for another 6 months, just for the fact that the idea that they would have more time than me pissed me off, okay? I was pissed off all the time my first year. I'd take people's telephone numbers and charge phone calls to them. I stole big books from meetings. I saw how many big books I got. I used to take trips and I wasn't even sober just because they didn't have records. These people didn't keep records. These people, you could do anything. You could go to meetings and take trips, and I didn't believe these people, okay? Now, so, I came in and said, now I should tell you about how I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay, if you don't believe in God, I'll tell you a very interesting story. In 1975, I was living in San Francisco. I moved into what's called a shooting gallery. A shooting gallery is a place where you shoot, okay? And I'm not talking about rabbits, okay? Anyway, you go up there and you shoot, and anyway, in the room, there was a room. It was just a room. It was an empty room, and on the floor was a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That was it. That was the only thing on the floor, okay?
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
All right. Now, it was a second edition, of course. That was 1975, because the third edition didn't come out to 1976. And in the book, I opened up the book. And I didn't know anybody, okay? I just moved to San Francisco. And I opened up the book and it said, to Jim. Okay? And the date was way before it, but it said, to Jim. Okay, that's all I saw. And it says, this book will work for you, okay? Please read it. Then in some really bad handwriting, it said, fuck this goddamn book, okay? So guess one was one guy was great. So I had that book to this day, and I drank, my first few years, I would take a glass of wine and read the book, okay? And it's very interesting if you read the book while you're drinking. It has a whole new meaning to it, okay? So I would read the book and drink and read the different stories. Now, I don't know if some of you know about the Newcomer, and the sponsor told him to go home and read. He said he wanted to know about sex. Is there anything about sex in the big book? And the sponsor said, well, why don't you go home and read page 69? But the unfortunate Newcomer, he was dyslexic. So the Newcomer, he turned to page 96, and he read the following thing that he read about sex, because the sponsor told him to read about sex. Do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again. You are sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you offer. Okay. It is really, this book is mind-boggling. Page 69 is sex. Page 6 and 7 are 6 and 7, 76 is the 6 and 7 step. I mean, this book is mind-boggling. Okay? Aldous Huxley, okay, the great philosopher of the 20th century, said that Bill Wilson was probably the greatest social architect of the 20th century. And then, I really, truly believe that. He also said that Alcoholics Anonymous would probably be the greatest spiritual movement of the 20th century. And, to me, I think it really is. I think it probably is. It doesn't mean religious. Now, see, that's where I got caught up. To give you a little bit about my background real quickly, I grew up in a small town here in Southern California. Some of you may have heard of it, Beverly Hills, north of Sunset, and that's very important that you know that. And in the biggest house in the street, the one you couldn't see from the street, one of those kind of places. But, see, this disease doesn't know from economics. This disease doesn't know from where you came from. I went to private schools. I got education. Fuck that shit. I didn't even make it through high school, okay? Because I was real busy. I was a very busy person as a child. I was very busy. My father was a doctor, okay? My father was a psychiatrist, and I was very, very busy shooting drugs at 14 years old. I was very busy. I would go and we used to get mail. We used to get Dexedrine in the mail, okay? Now, I always got the mail, and my mother would go around, she'd take the Dexedrine, she'd clean the house very quickly. And I noticed that I would clean and I'd clean the house very quickly. But I always think of myself more as an alcoholic than a drug addict, because I took drugs only so I could drink more, Okay? I found out that if you took speed, you had an empty leg, and you could drink as way far more than those other alcoholics. When they fell on the ground, you were still drinking when you took dexedrine, okay? Pharmaceutical speed, there's nothing like it, okay? And so I used to take that. Now, don't say I'm a drug addict. I only took speed for 14 years. It's really hardly even worth mentioning, okay? So I got sober, and sobriety. Like I said, I was real angry. I really did not like anybody in AA. I did not like anybody, and I remember going to a meeting, and I was taking after about 2 years sober. I got into a relationship. We stayed together for 10 years. He had a gun just in case of an emergency, and he was suicidal, which was always good for me because my father had committed suicide when I was 18, so it was kind of a healthy relationship here. And he had a gun, so in case of an emergency, you never know when you might want to kill yourself. And so I, got a little angry one day, and I took the gun to the meeting that I was secretary of, and I waved the gun around, and I said I was going to kill everybody in the meeting. The funniest thing is somebody told me later that somebody leaned over, this new guy was absolutely, his eyes were like this, and go, oh my God, and somebody leaned over and said, don't worry, honey, he's sober. And, it was a Beyond Baroque in Venice, and somebody came and they took the gun away from me. Jack Strand, he came and he took the gun away from me. And people in alcoholics can do. Where else can I go? You try to do this at the Elks Club, okay? It is not going to work, all right? Where else can you go? And you go, fuck all of you, and they say, keep coming back, honey. Okay? It ain't going to work anywhere else, all right? This is the only place I know that works, all right? Okay? Everybody that tells you they love everybody in Alcoholics Anonymous, honey, these people obviously aren't going to enough meetings, okay? You go to enough meetings and you're new and you will find people you don't like. There are a lot of people I don't like. I don't love everybody in meetings of AA. I have never loved everybody. I've come to start being a human, and it took me many, many years to become human, to realize that I don't like everybody. There's a lot of people I wouldn't have lunch with. There's a lot of people I don't say, how are you doing? Because I really don't want to know. There's a lot of people I say, I just stay away from. And that's how I did, my being sober is all part of my life. It is my life. In a year and a half, I'll be sober as long as I was alive before. And this is my life. I don't believe I'm living an unnatural lifestyle. I'm living a natural lifestyle. Because if I was living an unnatural lifestyle, how could I possibly stay sober twice as long as I drank and almost as long as I was alive before? That would be an impossibility. So I am living a natural lifestyle. So this as a human being, there's things I don't like. There's things there's stuff I don't like. I divide my sobriety up in this way. My first 5 years was finding a new way of living. 5 to 10 was putting it into practice, which was really tough, okay? 10 to 15, my whole idea of Alcoholics Anonymous changed. My whole idea of what it meant to me changed. When I was 16 years sober, I ended up in a mental hospital. I was diagnosed bipolar. My father was bipolar. He committed suicide. And I found out that I was bipolar. So my whole idea of who Jim was changed from 15 to 20 years sober. And now, then 20 to 25 years sober was finding a new way of living. And now I find 25 to 30 years sober, putting it back into practice one more time. Okay? And putting it into practice, the first 3 steps got me sober. The 10, 11, 12 steps keep me sober. The steps in between, what they do is get me to the point. Now, what I like to do, my favorite step of all is the 3rd step. The 3rd step, I'll tell you why the 3rd step is my favorite step. When I was newly sober, my sponsor said to me, okay, don't look at the wall. Tell me what the 3rd step says. And I said, turn your will and life over to the care of God. He said, okay, you said the 3 least important parts and you missed the 3 most important parts. I said, what's that? He said, the 3 most important words. I said, what's that? He said, made a decision. The 3rd step is not about turning it over. It's about making a decision. I said, well, what do you mean by that? He goes, he says, okay, you go down to LAX and you get on an airplane And you're the pilot, you know how they say hello to you when you get in? The pilot says, you know, I have made a decision to fly this plane. I've never flown before, but I've made a decision to fly this plane. What would you do? I said, I'd leave, okay? He said, that's the point, okay? You've only made a decision to turn your wheel. I'm not asking you to turn over. You don't get there to 11 steps, so let's just deal with making a decision. Now, for me, if you're an alcoholic of my variety, what it is I am the kind of alcoholic that for me, making a decision is a world event. Okay, I go and buy a hot dog for lunch, okay, and I ask to order for ketchup, okay. Now, while I'm eating the one with ketchup, I think about how I really wanted one with mustard. And I pine for the one with mustard. And I realized that if I'd only had the one with mustard, I would have had a much better life. My sobriety would have been better. My day would have been better. In fact, why the hell did I even order the fucking one with mustard? You know what? I fucking can't stand this goddamn lunch. You know what's the point? I'm gonna quit my goddamn job and drink. What's the fucking point of this? See, if you're an alcoholic like me, that for me is making a decision. Okay? So it's a world event. It's a big deal. Okay? But I realized, he said to me, it's no big deal. We were sitting it was after the meeting in Manhattan Beach Clubhouse, the old Manhattan Beach Clubhouse, and my sponsor said to me, okay, he said, do you think you can drink anymore? I said, no. He said, do you think your life is a mess? I said, yes. He said, you came to believe in a power greater than yourself? I said, I don't believe in God. He said, do you believe that he said, do you believe that you might believe in God? No. Do you believe that you might believe that someday you might believe in God? I said, yes. He said, okay, can you make a decision that you might that you will in your life? I said, yeah. He goes, good, you made your third 3 steps. Now go home and write your fourth. And that's what he did. You know, I went, oh my God. It wasn't a big deal. He didn't make it into these people like I've heard people say, well, my sponsor's having me journaling and journaling and journaling and yodeling and yodeling and yodeling. You know, I don't know what that's all about. I remember when I was about 10 years sober and I broke up my relationship with Bill and Paul. I called up Paul. He says, what are you doing about moving out of there? Now let me give you what it's like. How I am a little stubborn. My partner had already moved in. His new lover had already moved in with us, who happened to be somebody I sponsored, but that's a whole nother story, okay? And they had already moved in together in the other bedroom, but I just might stay. You never know what might happen. So I'm sitting there, and my sponsor says to me, what are you doing? And I said, I'm writing about it. And he said, honey, put down the pencil and pick up the suitcase, okay? He said, the road to hell is paved with pages of inventory, okay? And go and do what you need to do and get on with your life. It's a program of action, not a program of sitting and writing what you're going to do. See, alcoholics are always getting ready. We're getting ready to go here. We're getting ready to go out and drink. We're getting ready to go home. We're getting ready to do this. We're getting ready to get sober. I was getting ready to get sober. It took me 4 years to get sober. Getting ready to get sober, getting ready to get sober, getting ready to get sober. I'm always getting ready for something, okay? And finally, it got to the point where I can't get ready. I had to pack my bags, I had to move out, and I had to move on to my own, you know. And, you know, I tell you, at 25 years sober, I'm now living alone. I'm going into therapy. I'm finding out who this person is and I'm just starting to learn who I am. I am just starting to learn who this person is that I have not known. I thought, you know, people say, oh, you think that at 25 years sober, they come up to me and say, you know, Jim, I want to talk to you because you probably have all the answers, honey. I said, I'm just starting to get the questions, okay? I don't even know what to do with my life. I don't know what to do. You know, I tell people all the time, and people know I say this all the time when I speak. Most people don't stick around Alcoholics Anonymous long enough to find out that it really works. Somebody came up to me and said, what is that? How long is that? And I said, it's a lifetime. It's a lifetime. I'm just learning about my life. I'm just learning who I am. You know, I was not horrible when I got sober. I worked for a company for 23 years. They gave me 30 years, and I retired with all the benefits and making as enough money as I was when I was working. I don't have to work, you know. And now I'm starting to realize, oh my God, this is my life. I spent all my life busy, so I didn't have to deal with who I was because I was afraid of who I was for many years sober. So if you think that's all going to happen in the first 6 months, it ain't. Okay? You know, you're going to do all the steps on your coffee break, and then you're going to go home, and your life is going to be wonderful. I've heard people say this. It ain't going to happen. You know, it's a constant learning. It's a constant thing. It's a constant going on. It's a constant life process. Sobriety is a life process. It's not a one thing that we do and then we go on to something else. But there is a line that I love in the big book, and it's the only line that I can say verbatim. I hope I can say it verbatim, because my first sponsor told me never, quote, never memorize the big book because you never want to read it again. And that line is, practical experience has shown us nothing will sustain more sobriety more than anything else, and that is intensive work with other alcoholics. This will work when all other. Let me say it exactly how it is, okay? Because it says practical experience shows us that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. See, I still don't want to memorize it. It works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. And you see, the reason I come to meetings is I don't get a knock at my door and say, hi, we're other alcoholics. We'd like intensive work done with us. So I need to go to meetings to find other alcoholics so I can do intensive work. I don't sponsor a lot of people. Whoever sponsors the most people does not win, okay? But I carry the message to a lot of people. And you know, part of carrying the message of Alcoholics Anonymous is not just going to a meeting and sponsoring people. Carrying the message of Alcoholics Anonymous is when I go into Ralph's and the woman is rude to me, I say, I'm sorry. I apologize. I am nice to people. That is carrying the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's carrying it way beyond these rooms. It's carrying it in traffic. It's carrying it on the 5 freeway. When I get on there, and I live in Burbank, and I get on the 5 freeway and it's jammed and somebody gives me the finger, it takes everything I have to say, you know what? Don't. Well, sometimes I drive my Jeep, you know, my army Jeep. So, you know, you don't want to piss anybody off because, you know, if bullets don't really go through anything. So, you know, but I have to remember that I carry that message everywhere I go, because I want to carry that message and let people know Alcoholics Anonymous works everywhere in this world. You know, everywhere I go. I think my greatest amends that I ever made in this life is my mother was 64 years old when I got sober. She's 90 years old today. And you know what? My greatest amends, my sponsor told me, I said, how do I forgive my mother? What do I do? I took a gun, you know, I took a knife to her and all these different things. And how am I going to forgive to my mom? And my sponsor says, you know what? You do a living amends. You do the amends to your mother by being the best son you can possibly be. And that's what I've done for the last 25 years. And the hardest amends for me to do was go to my father's grave. And I didn't do this until I was 20-something years sober. My father's buried, by the way, at Sinai Mortuary right down on Forest Lawn Drive. And I live in Burbank. And I went down there and I forgave my father for killing himself, for being bipolar, that I finally understood. I hated my father for years for doing that, for killing himself when I was 18 years old. So, you know, stick around. You will find things that you will incredible. You will find a life that's incredible. I can promise you one thing. Whether you drink or you stay sober, and you keep coming back to Alcoholics Anonymous, I can promise you one thing, okay? You are walking through the very best years of your life. You are walking through the very best years of your life. And you will find that even if you come in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous, it will fucking ruin your drinking, okay? Because once you get a touch of Alcoholics Anonymous, you're going to see AA at the bottom of that glass. I'll tell you, every time I went to AA, all I saw was AA at the bottom of that glass, okay? So it's a wonderful experience. Keep coming back. Thanks a lot. Do we ask questions? See how well they listen? No.
Let them.
Yeah. I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I have one
Beyond Broke.
Beyond Broke, right, in Venice. Yes, it's a meeting. It was a meeting down there, a gay meeting, right. I don't even know if the meeting exists anymore, does it? Yeah, I think so. It does, yeah. City Hall. Yes, it's in City Hall. Yes, it is.
Questions? No questions?
You want us to ask a question, see how well you listen? Okay. What year did she get sober? Okay, you're right. Okay. I'm sorry?
Oh. You know, I'm not sure if that group is still going on. I know that they went on for years because they used to perform at Living Sober in San Francisco.
Right.
Pardon me? About the Brownback Readers Theater? Well, it was a group of women that consisted of alcoholics and members of Al-Anon, co-alcoholics, and what they used to call para-alcoholics, now they call children of alcoholics. And they would just do these performances in which they did their own stories. And it was a production that went on, it went on for years, for a good 15 years, into my sobriety, because I used to see them perform on a regular basis. But they were out of Sonoma County originally. Yeah. Yeah. Hi. Hi, Dwayne. Thank you.
Jim.
We all started the same way, honey.
I'm still in the fog.
24 this past March. Thank you.
No, Jim. It's Jim. It's 25 years and 10 months. I'll be 26 in July.
It's all in 24-hour blocks, though.
That's right. 10-minute blocks, honey. Yeah, really.
Me?
How long you sober?
4 years and 6 months.
Yay.
So, 4 years and 6 months.
You betcha.
Mm-hmm. Right. I didn't get that.
And that's what brings me back to Sharon, because I seen him and damn, and I remember he was a resentment. I remember he had such kinky fetishes, but I know it was 4 years ago. It had been a year at the most, a year and a half ago. That's not very free honesty. So why would you be on the panel? So you could with me again, so maybe I should go back today. Why? Because I don't know who's thinking who's not to do now.
Dwayne.
I didn't understand.
Dwayne, Sharon was asked to lead this meeting. The two of us are the speakers, and Sharon was here. He was here to be of service. And if you want to talk to Sharon about something personal, you need to talk to him after the meeting one-on-one, honey.
Right.
Okay?
Hi.
Those of us who are alcoholics would drink and we drink and things happen, and just these enormous gaps in your memory, it's because we were alcoholics and we drink. But dreams are like we don't know.
I'll just share with you what was shared with me. And I did a lot of reading and a lot of talking to people early on in this. First of all, I accept the Big Book's definition of alcohol, being an alcoholic, which is a mental obsession and a physical allergy. And I have all of that, okay? But I literally had someone explain to me one time that we do have a different brain chemistry, and that when we drink, that sometimes the memory is affected by it, and that we literally do not experience what we're experiencing in our memory. And so we don't have, it's not there to recapture. Yeah. Just like being amnesiac and not remember.
My name's Art. I'm an alcoholic. Deacon, thank you so much for your share. Sean, thank you for being here. Very well, I'm 10 months sober, and I'm going through a period right now where all the unprocessed emotions start to come in waves and waves. And very often I'm starting to feel disconnected from my program, disconnected from God. I didn't want to come here today. I forced myself. Does that ever happen to you? And what do you do about it?
You want to answer first?
Sure. Do I feel disassociated?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, I'm bipolar, okay? So I can tell you that that's, even though I take medication, that's part of my life, okay? Maybe somebody who's not bipolar might be different. And so so that's hard for me to determine, is this my alcoholism or is this my being bipolar? And so I can't say, because I'm sober 25 years, I still get that. So I would like the D to answer, because you're not bipolar.
Sure.
And yeah,
No.
go ahead.
Well, the reason I laughed is because earlier today, I found myself walking up and down trying to decide what I was going to do next, you know. And I've been doing these conventions for a long time. And I can tell you that one of the main reasons that I'm here is because about 3 years ago, I moved up to the mountains to Tehachapi. And at the first Sunday morning meeting that I went to, there was a young man that walked up to me, handed me a card and said, "Give me a call, we have more in common than alcoholism." And that young man is Don W., and he's sitting back there. And Don W. has been a gift to me, because at that morning I decided maybe I can stay in Tehachapi after all, because I hadn't seen a gay person since I'd been there, you know, anyhow, that I knew of. But over the years, you know, I sat here this morning, and I sat in the meeting last night, and I realized that I have to tell you, these rooms are filled with ghosts of people past. This convention is celebrating 20 years on the shoulders of many, many people who are here but not seen today, you know. And many of those people were significant in my getting sober and significant in my sobriety. When I was 12 years sober, the old-timers in gay AA caught my ass at the AALA convention and helped save my life, you know, because within a month of being 12, 4 people who were 12 went out all around me, you know. And so there have been times when I find myself thinking, oh, well, I'm too old for this now, or I've done it too long, or blah, blah, blah. But then all I have to do is come through the door and there's Terry's face, or there's a newcomer sitting next to me shaking, kicking a foot or something, you know. And I know I'm where I need to be. This morning, I had to go back to my room, sit down, pray, read some of the book, do a little assessment to me, talk to myself a little bit, get ready to come back down and participate in my own sobriety. Inevitably, it comes back to me. I was feeling a little shunned because someone had avoided holding my hand for the prayer in one of the workshops I was in this morning. So I leaned back and held another one. I have to tell you, I've been here 24 years. I've never had a single person not want to hold my hand in the room of Alcoholics Anonymous to say a prayer. I took that personally for about a second. But I realized, you know what, this is about me. I need to find a newcomer and reach out somewhere. I need to go talk to somebody. So, Art, I have to tell you, if I'm disconnected, it's that old thing about the footprints in the sand. I know who's moved. I know who needs to stop and take a look and do something that makes me feel a part of this fellowship again. And it's worked. It's worked for a long, and it's working now. It's working now. Mm-hmm. There's one back there. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Matt. Well, I remember my sponsor telling me, he said to me, you're a winner. And I said, I thought the winners were the people that stayed sober. And he said, no, honey, you're a winner because you keep coming back. And those are the winners. He said, the losers are the people that never try. I remember when I broke up my 10-year relationship, he said, honey, you're a winner, at least you tried. And he used to tell me, I remember when I finally did get sober and I got a year, and he said to me, honey, I said, well, this is my, you know, this time around or something like this, I care. And he said, no, honey, this is your last time around. And I remember that, and you know, you are a winner, baby. You're a winner because you keep coming back.
That's right.
You keep coming back, and that's what's important. There was a guy named Red Copley who used to sit at the top of the stairs of the AT Center. Terry Sue remembers, and Red Copley used to say, you keep coming back. And he died when I was 3 years sober. He was 25 years sober at the time. And that's like, you know, just you keep coming back. So you go out. You know, hear people say they go out. You know, it's big deal. You know, that's what we do. You know, when alcoholics get upset, we don't go, oh shit, I think I'll go to the library. You know, we go and drink. That's what we do. This is part of our life. You know, I mean, you know, and that's great. We go drink, and so what? Big fucking deal. People make a big deal about it. So what? You went out and drink. You know, you're back here. You're here. It's wonderful. I give you a hug. You know, and if you drink again, so what? You know, I can't stand it when somebody. I'll just end it with this. Somebody can't stand it. Somebody came up to me at a meeting and said. They were all upset. They ran out of the meeting. I was outside this is when I smoked, having a cigarette at a meeting, and someone said, oh my God, there's somebody drunk in the meeting. I went, oh no, not an alcoholic at an AA meeting. I hate that when that happens. And I went in there and I picked him up and I moved him out and I said, here, Jim Feldman's alcoholic removal service. We're at it again, you know. You know, keep coming back. If you're drunk in a meeting, if you're loaded. I've been going to some meetings and I was loaded, and honey, some of the meetings I went to, thank God I was loaded. Okay? That's enough out of me. Thank you. I think it's time to end the meeting.
I think we need to.
You're wonderful, baby.
Thanks, sweetheart. Good job.
That is all.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.